EM Weekly is starting right now.
We can't be focused on broadcasting. You can't just turn up louder and say, but we put out flyers, but we had a meeting and no one came. That's a communication. When no one shows up,
Hi, and welcome to EM Weekly. This is your host, Todd DeVoe speaking. And today is the last episode of the year. 2017 has gone out and 2018 is coming in. And man, I'm glad that 2017's gone. Whew, what a crazy year. We talked a little bit about it in the last episode, but all the fires in California, the hurricanes in the southeast, Florida got hit, Puerto Rico gets hit, Texas gets hit, floods all over the place, snowstorms are happening. Man, 2017 is definitely a crazy year for us. Even worldwide, volcanoes going off, mudslides happening, floods everywhere else in the world as well. So hopefully 2018 will be a little bit slower for us to give us time to mitigate and prepare and to recover from all these disasters that happened this year. Maybe our responses will be down. I'm not much for doing the New Year's resolution. You know, it's always like, I'm going to go to the gym. You go to the gym and it's crowded for the first month and then you wane off or whatever. And it's human nature, right? You get excited for a little bit about something and just challenges get in the way and you let it go. And sometimes it doesn't pan out the way you want it to pan out. But I am for making plans for the new year. You know, kind of sitting down and reflecting on what you did in 2017 and see what you could do better in 2018. Not so much a resolution, but just planning, right? Looking at it and putting forth. So here at EM Weekly, we have a great plan for 2018. We're going to bring some, like I said before, some big name guests in. We're going to be doing some more stuff on the website. If you haven't been to the website, it's www.emweekly.com. Over there, you'll see some posts and whatnot over there. And this year, we requested and we looked out and we have some people that have agreed to do some guest blog posting. So you're not just going to be hearing from me, you'll be hearing from others as well. And if you guys have interest in doing some posting for whatever reason, we'd love to have you. Again, it's the community that we're building. So we're going to have some people coming and putting some different points of view about emergency management on emweekly.com. So I'm excited about that as well. Moving forward, one of my goals here is National Preparedness Month. I hope to have a theme this year. We tried to do it last year and then all the hurricanes came. So we're going to do themes for National Preparedness Month. We're going to do a theme for October as well. And even though we do the Great Shakeout in October, what we want to do in October is I really want to highlight women in emergency management. And I want to put that out there on the air. That my commitment to that in October is that we're going to do what we plan on doing this year and doing the women of emergency management in October. And so hopefully that will go through without having any hurricanes or major disasters that are going to take our time during that period. So anyway, that's my commitment to you guys for 2018. Thank you for all listening to what we have going on here. I think this is going to be a great year. Thank you all for joining us in 2017. And well, that's my little 2018 New Year's commitment to you all. This episode, we're talking to Pete Turner, who was essentially, in his words, a spy. He was Army intelligence, went into various different areas and understands messaging and how to relate with people that aren't in the loop, right? So the question always is, when we talk about messaging for disasters, whether it be evacuation, whether it be preparedness, whether it be the recovery aspect of things, how do we message people? And I think that's been one of those concerns that we've had for a long time. One of those issues where, we know what we're saying. And I know that we've talked about this here when we're talking about the nuclear planning, the EPZ. What does it mean to people that aren't from the area when you're messaging saying, evacuate north of the 405? What's that mean for people? If you don't live in Southern California, if you don't live, in the area, and you put the message you need to evacuate north of the 405, you don't know what we're talking about. Those of you that you're listening right now going, what the heck's the 405, right? So that aren't in Southern California. So that's my point, right? So we have lots of guests and stuff like that down here. So messaging is important in that aspect of it. But truly, how do we get people engaged in preparedness, right? And it's something that we're failing at here. I think the last statistic that I looked at is less than 1% of the population is prepared to this FEMA standard 72-hour preparedness, right? So kind of redundant there, but you know what I'm saying, right? They're not up to the 72-hour standard. And we've even pushed it out now, right? We're talking about 14 days that we want people to be prepared in their home for 14 days. What does that mean? What does that look like? All right. And how do we tell people to spend money on something that we're not sure it's going to happen? It's like insurance, right? So it's messaging is really important. So I think that having Pete on the show to talk about, from his perspective, as a non-emergency manager, but somebody who has dealt with messaging with populations that don't speak the same language, I think that you're going to get a lot out of it. We'll be back right after this short break.
Emergencies happen, whether they're related to medical emergencies, threats of physical violence, weather-related, or other. One of the most difficult things during an emergency is to find help and quickly and efficiently communicate with all parties, regardless of whether you're an administrator, law enforcement, or the end user. With Titan HST, we help distort time by creating high-tech, yet simple-to-use mobile-based applications that connect you with the people who can help you. At Titan HST, we believe in the power of people.
Hi, this is Todd DeVoe from EM Weekly. If your company is in the emergency management and response space, EM Weekly is a place for you to advertise. Each week, we bring in experts in emergency management, response, and leadership from around the world, and they're here to share their best practices. Our listeners are eager to learn about new products and ideas, so this is the space for you. For more information, please contact Brian at emweekly.com.
Welcome back from that short break, and let's continue on. We're here at Barnes & Noble. I have Pete Turner here, and we're going to talk a little bit about some information that he received about some responses around the area, and we're going to talk about his podcast. So, Pete, welcome to EM Weekly.
Yeah, man, thanks. It's my pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to doing this, so thanks for having me on. I love it.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, what you're doing now, and what we can share here with the EM Weekly crowd.
I've actually dipped my toe into the EM world. I've helped out George Whitney a little bit with his business over at Complete EM. I helped him out over there, and learned a lot about it. Actually appeared on his show a couple of times too. Mm-hmm. So why would Pete appear on a show when he's not really in the EM world? Well, I was a spy, and I spent a lot of time overseas working in the villages and doing things with the locals. And that sounds way more nefarious than it is. I'm glad to openly talk about it, because when an American shows up wearing civilian clothes in a foreign land, what does everybody think that person is?
Right.
I mean, look, I one time flew on a C-5 out of Travis Air Force Base. Got long hair, in good shape, running around. They're like, "Are you with this cargo?" And they point, and it's a bunch of Zodiacs, like 6 of them. And I look and I go, "No, no one believes me." I'm just not going to say anything about it. So even my peers think that I'm a spy. So I'm open about it, because why create it? Other people do it differently, but I don't. That's a whole lot of setup for me to say this. I get people. I get the ground truth and the reality of what, when strategy and tactics meet ground truth, that's me. That's where I'm at. And so it's when it comes to us planning and trying to mitigate the hazards, risks, and damage from a disaster, I'm a kind of guy you talk to about culture, about, how will this work? How do we get this message out? I mean, what's the number? 5% of people are considered prepared?
Oh, I think it's less than that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So what do you do now? How do you deal with that? And is that number accurate? It's 100 questions. So I deal in the reality space, which is very unfair for me to say, but it is what I do. Mm-hmm. I go out and I talk to people, and I understand more about where they're at and what it takes. Look, if you can accomplish your goal by leveraging somebody else's culture, duh, why not do that? Like, why work so hard to create something new if something that exists already will accomplish it? If that makes sense.
That's like one of the biggest things that we talk about, specifically messaging, right? Yeah. In disasters. And, what culture are you specifically messaging to? And in today, I mean, as much as we used to call ourselves the melting pot back in the day, and somebody made a better analogy of this, is that we're more like a tossed salad, if you will, where there's a bunch of different things in there.
Yeah.
And the idea behind that is that each culture is kind of keeping its own self, right?
Yeah.
And so now we have to think about messaging based upon what people think is the truth and how we get this out to them. And so we talk about an evacuation order. It means different things to different people, especially in a place like Southern California where there's a bunch of different ideas of what that means.
Well, you think about evacuating from Southern California. I thought about this the other day. I saw the sign for the evac route for a tsunami. Like there is no evac route for Southern California. There is none. I mean, it's as soon as you go to get on it, the evacuation is over. You can't get anywhere, you know? I mean, there are so many ingresses and egresses along the way. It's just chaos. So, yes, there are planned routes, but the reality is I'm going to take a different route because that's just not going to work, right? And you talk about culture. I would encourage all of us in the EM world to expand what we see and think of culture as being omnipresent instead of segmented. You know, like everybody's into diversity right now, right? What's the antonym of diversity? Unity, right? So how do we create a diversified, unified approach to getting people out of an area or helping them hunker down? Or how do we create a multicultural resilience plan so that a community can provide for itself and not take the burden off the EM, but to okay, that's accounted for. You know, what do you guys need? There's one point of contact. We're sending you sandbags, whatever it's going to be.
Right.
So those things are tougher when you think of culture as segments and think of it as a whole bunch of intersections. And culture intersects nonstop. It's omnipresent. It affects everything you do. It never stops. It's like gravity. So if you're constantly thinking from a cultural perspective and cultural lens, whatever you think works in the EOC, that's not reality on the ground. Mm-hmm. You have to refocus and take your camera and flip it 180 and say, how would this work in this part of town, in this part of town? And it's hard. It's hard, but that's what it takes to communicate across cultures and through those intersections. Otherwise, you just come blasting and you're going to get results that you don't like.
You know, I was talking to Alice Stanley at the IAEM conference in Long Beach a few weeks ago, and in our conversation, we talk about culture, and he goes into the idea of culture is not just Native American culture versus Irish American culture versus this versus that. He goes into the idea that culture is also age.
Yeah.
You know, our perceptions of what we know at this age is different compared to what it is for, say, the youth today or the millennials or what that is, and how do we, communicating across the board, and it goes into the fact, like my son, for instance, he doesn't watch program TV.
Right.
He doesn't, he watches Netflix, he watches the Amazon, he watches whatever's on PlayStation, lots of YouTube channels and stuff.
Totally different way to consume media.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we relate messages to someone like him, where he's not listening to the ES message, doesn't get to him.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it does get to his phone, and we had the whole thing in Northern California where I'm from where they didn't use the phone system. And then when I got alerted down here in Southern California, I don't know what, someone drew a polygon around all those phone numbers and sent me like 3 or 4 messages in rapid succession. Well, after all of the crisis was primarily over, there were still fires going on, but like now you're going to alert a guy in Southern California that Santa Rosa's on fire?
Right.
But we got to do better than that, and that goes back to the internal institutional culture, right? Where we have this us versus them kind of attitude, and that can't be. You can't service the population if and all institutions have this problem. I call it an accountability ladder problem, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's worried about their boss, so they're all looking up the ladder at the boss above them and maybe around that boss to the next one. That orients you upwards instead of down on the ground where the ladder is founded, and where all the help is going to be. So we have to get past that point of thinking about culture in terms of you're Hispanic, I'm white, you're, from the east side of town. It's way more than that. And it is complex. But you can't ignore it. It's gravity. It's everywhere. It is impacting your mission. So how do you deal with those things? You immerse yourselves in the community. If I go to I guarantee this. If I go to any UASI meeting anywhere, I will look around and see an institutional knowledge base that's focused inward and upward. It won't be focused on the ground. Yes, there'll be someone there from Walgreens talking about resilience. Absolutely. But the people on the ground that are going to be participating in these processes when there's an earthquake, when there's a flood, when there's a hurricane, they're not going to be properly represented there. It's all going to be, oriented upwards. There will be some church members, absolutely, but I will be able to go, that's internally focused, and most of the things that I'm going to point to are going to be internally focused.
Yeah, you're pretty close to being 100% right on that. There are some variances here and there.
Sure.
It's interesting because one of the things that we reach out to in the area is the thing they call the VOAD, the Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster.
Right.
And then there's the COAD, which is basically the same thing. I forget what the C stands for. Sorry, everybody. I think it's Community Organizations Active in Disaster. That's what it means. We'll go with that if it's not.
I like it. I like it.
And so we reached out to the VOADs and the COADs and tried to build those relationships. But it's kind of hard for them to be at the meetings that we have from 9 to 5 in the morning because they're volunteer organizations.
Yeah.
So they work. Let's talk about Team Rubicon for a minute. The military based volunteer organization that
I know William McNulty.
Right. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Jake. But the idea though is that the paid staff obviously is here in Southern California. Everywhere else, except for maybe here, I think the regional administrators are paid. But for the most part, it's a volunteer organization.
Right.
90% is volunteer. And it's hard to ask those guys and gals that are Team Rubicon members to make it to the regional, like for us in Orange County, we have what we call OCEMO, the Orange County Emergency Managers Association, or those meetings like that. How do you get volunteers to make it to those meetings, take time out of their day?
Let me ask you this question. Do you want to go to that meeting? Like deep down inside, do you want to go?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I love it. A yes and a wink. So I don't want to swear in your podcast. So why the hell would anybody else want to? So here's the thing, and all this stuff applies like on the ground in combat zones too, right? I want all you elders to come in here and get your help. We're gonna help you, and you jam help down people's throat. It doesn't work that way. I'll use the example of active shooter drills, right? Mm-hmm. Anytime the police, the police in general, and I'm very, very unfair in generalizing, have a problem with community contact, right? There's people that absolutely love them, and there's people that absolutely hate them. But the people in the middle, they're not very good at moving them. Why? Because they've got an institutional ALP problem, accountability ladder problem. Every time you do a police training, you should invite, not ask, invite, would you please be my guest and come down? I'm going to buy you lunch. I want to show you guys what we're doing. And you invite 10 people. If you get 10, then invite 20, and just work on growing that aspect of it. So when you do an active shooter drill, have community people come down and witness this, right? Be part. I want you to see what we're doing to keep our kids safe. Please be my guest. And it's on whoever owns that part of the plan to bring people in and measure that. That measure of affect is important over the measures of effect. Effect is absolutely important, but look, if you can create a desire to come to these meetings, to participate in some way in training, even if it's just to observe, even if it's just to put that message into that group in 50 different neighborhoods, you map that, now you have the ability to sort of reliably communicate with the community as a whole. So yeah, the boring meeting that no one wants to go to and has a lingo that they're not going to get.
Right.
Okay, yeah, have them come to that, but do something more, like ride-alongs are great, but you should be like, we're bursting at the seams with ride-alongs, how do we do more?
Right.
How do we get more people involved? You are part of the community that I've identified because I've got internal people. Let me back up. In combat situations, all of the intel is focused on lethal threat, right? Hey, Pete, I want to find the most influential person in this valley. And I always say, it's you, sir. It's you, Commander. Right? So we have to do the same thing internally in police stations and in emergency operations centers. We have to know the non-lethal, the people, the community leaders that do move 1,000 people,
right,
that are connected well. If you've got a notable blogger in your area, I know this seems weird, but if they have 60,000 people paying attention to their blog and most of them are there, like in Orange County in particular, 3 million people live here?
3.5.
So there's bloggers. Heather Dubrow is a celebrity in this area, right? Heather Dubrow's messaging ability trumps anything anybody else can do in Orange County. So if she's like, this is really cool, I went out and the sheriff invited me to go to this active shooter thing, and if she says those words on her shows, exponential awareness of those things, even across the country at some points. So we have to get out of the old mode of we're an institution and we're going to send out flyers to educate people, because that just doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things I try to do prior. We have the emergency community response team, the CERT programs, and we kind of took upon that and built this program called Neighbor for Neighbor, where we were going out to each neighborhood and creating their own. They weren't volunteers. They didn't have to come join the CERT team if they didn't want to be part of it. But what they were doing is building each block by block a network of people that could be there for them in case of anything, whether it's a local disaster. I mean, what I mean by local disaster being the little old lady down the street who has to go to the doctor and doesn't have a ride. Right. And now you're meeting them, because that's what we're missing in these communities here. Like 3.5 million people. It's an urban area.
That's a lot.
You don't don't know who your neighbor is, and you live in condominium complexes, you don't know who the person who lives above you or below you are.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to do with the Neighbor for Neighbor program. And I think that was pretty successful. And we were able to take that model and push it out. But yet, it's still pockets. It hasn't grown. It's not all over the place. It's still pockets. And so there are some things that we're doing to try to break down those barriers of the different culture. But it's definitely difficult, especially when I think we have a culture, generalized culture here in America, where they are looking towards the government for direction and for help. And there's a really cool little commercial. I don't know who put it together. And it's these two people that are on an escalator. Have you seen that one?
No.
So they're going up an escalator, and the escalator stops.
Yeah.
And they start screaming, "Hello, help, help!"
Yeah.
And they don't try walking up or down the escalator.
Yeah.
They're stuck on the escalator,
right?
And the guy's like, "Don't worry about it. They're going to come soon to help us out."
Yeah.
And I think that's who we are as a people. Is we get stuck on the escalator where we can still use it as stairs, but we just choose not to.
Yeah. And look, I am being critical of the system because I've seen the systems not work, right? And that's the point of view I'm coming from.
Right.
But you're right. Like, people do get stuck on the escalator, and how do you get them off? And let me go back to your Neighbor for Neighbor program. So this is where culture works in your advantage, right? There are existing systems, networks that do this already for you. So, and I'm just going to, off the top of my head, think of some things. I mean, how popular is water polo here in Orange County, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you engage all the water polo organizations and say, hey, we just want to put some messages in. How can we be part of this? And yeah, it's a lot of work. You got to contact a lot of people, but you got 3.5 million people to deal with. So you have to talk to a lot of people. And maybe that's a whole different, you budget a whole person on look, social media, right? If your Twitter account isn't growing, if your blog presence isn't growing as an emergency management organization, then you have a problem. You're not communicating well.
Let's step outside of the Orange County, Southern California area, right?
Okay.
Because, this is what we know pretty well.
Yeah.
But let's go to, middle of the country.
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
Montana.
Yeah, flyover states.
Right.
Yes.
Like, how does an emergency... Yeah, I do too. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, I was just there last week.
So how does the emergency manager in Montana, whose, population is going to be way lower than us, and the idea of reaching out to those people, how do they get those people involved? I mean, Montana was a location of one of the larger earthquakes in the United States, right?
Yeah.
It's a hotbed, literally.
It is, yeah. It is. This is a great question. And, you have to know your community to know where the people are going to move from. What is the culture of Montana? My aunt and I had this discussion last week where fill in the blank department store wanted to come in and take over some of the older brands that were not working. And so they were going to fill that up, but they didn't know how to buy clothes from Missoula. So it's like not just jackets, this kind of jacket that's going to sell well. And it took them a couple of years before they got the vibe of what would sell. It's great to sell clothes from Southern California, but that doesn't work in Missoula. So you've got to adapt to the culture that's present there. And if you don't know, that's where the work begins. That's where you go out and you realize, look, it's Montana. There's a lot of Mormons there. And the Mormons are great at this, right? So go engage them and find out what's going on. And you find the elder and you say, listen, from your stake, I want to make sure you guys know how we're ready for these things. I want you to be my guest and come out and then ask them. You snowball it out. This is all spy stuff. Who else should I invite? Who else is an important leader that needs to see these messages so that when the escalator stops, you all know to call me. I'm the sheriff. I want you to call me directly or call my deputy directly. You've got a friend in the force. You've got a friend in the sheriff department. If we don't build those things, then this stuff works in rural Afghanistan, so it's gonna work in Missoula. It's gonna work in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. We have things that we can do. We have to use the culture of that area, and I would submit that most of these emergency managers either are from there or are going to be able to quickly adapt to what does work. And I use church as an example a lot because a lot of folks go to church,
right?
But the ranchers all have an association of some kind. I don't mean like the Ranchers Association, but they do something together,
right?
They meet and people congregate in certain areas. Not everybody, but if you're getting the bulk of the people, you're doing the bulk of the work.
One of the assignments I give my students is you're in charge of volunteer management, that type of thing for your community.
Right.
How would you reach, what who would you use for volunteers? How would you reach out to them? And this last assignment, I had one of my students put down that they would reach out to Greenpeace. And I was like, that is an interesting choice of who you'd use as a volunteer organization. And I thought, I asked them, he hasn't got back to me yet. And I asked him, I said, why Greenpeace? What skills do they have that you think that you'd want to use in a disaster? But the thing that got me thinking about that is a brilliant way to think outside the box, because I always, Chamber of Commerce is one of the ones you always go to, right? Because they have a vested interest in making sure the recovery of your city comes back, right? Monetary and also just community. Churches are always a great example because there's normally some groups or ministries, they call them, they're going to be involved. And then the service clubs, the Kiwanis Club, the Elks Club, the VFW,
all those things.
American Legion, those clubs that are out there, there's always those organizations to go to. Yeah. And what I say, this is what I teach in my class, is I tell my students, I said, find your key organization, whatever that one is for your community. So for where I live, it's either going to be your Lions Club or your Rotary Club. Okay. Those are the two that are key organizations. That's where the politicians come out of. Sure. If you're on the city council, you're part of the Rotary Club or the Lions Club. You know what I mean? Yeah. Those are the ones. Some of them have other clubs around the area, but you just find those key organizations, the ones that you have to belong to, and those are the ones that you need to reach out to help.
Yeah, I would even put more emphasis there, and I know that nobody wants to hear that, but I would say yes, Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, JC's, the youth element of those, the Key Club, and all those things. Because if you get kids passionate about it, they're going to beat their parents up. Why don't we have 5 gallons of water, or whatever the thing is going to be? You have to engage, and look. I talk a lot about affect over effect, and it freaks people out because they say affect's a verb. Affect is also a noun, right? And if you can create passion, if you can create action, if you can get people to come towards your organization, it doesn't matter. The effect will follow affect. I mean, look, here's how I explain it. If I write you 15 love letters, doesn't mean you're going to love me. That's effect based. But if I do things that make you look at me and gaze into my eyes, and I can sense that I'm wooing you. If I do that, say 15 times, much more powerful in terms of getting the thing that I want, right? So we have to engage. And I'm also big on this. Where is the work, right? It doesn't work. I talk to these 25 different agencies, and I just that's where the work is. The work is in building the relationship there and building your audience so that when you put a message into it, you get a reflection back. We can't be focused on broadcasting. You can't just turn up louder and say, but we put out flyers, but we had a meeting and no one came. That's a communication. When no one shows up, you're getting a null value back. Right. So you have to change your message. Yes. Not turn it up. Change the message. How do we get to these people? Who has an audience? Heather Dubrow has an audience. I'm going to see if I can talk to Heather Dubrow, and I'm going to appeal to her kind nature and wanting to, help her community out. And every community has someone that has a big audience. Right. So grab these people, leverage them, and create the affect that you want. Yeah,
you talk about communication and such. My nephew, he's deaf. Okay. He's actually an amazing kid. He's I wish you could hear this because I do pump him up a little bit. But he's a firefighter, a volunteer firefighter in upstate New York, and he has a deaf firefighter in his hand. He actually was the firefighter of the year for his company. So, look at that. Yeah, so he's great. Yeah. Right. But go back to the thing. I could yell at him as loud as I want. Right. And that boy won't hear me.
Absolutely. And this is like this. I like to use, unfairly, of course, a Texas accent. And if you go, no, you're not listening to me. I'm going to yell louder and slower. That person is not going to hear you. So what we're doing, every time you do something, you should think, how am I going to involve the community in this today? If every day, as an emergency manager, as a sheriff, as a fire chief, if the 3 of those people met someone new every day and invited right along with me today, take a day off, let me buy you lunch, and come right along with me. And if you get no's, that's where your work begins. You're like, all right, how do I figure this out? Who can I invite? And then tell that person, did you have fun today? And make sure they have a good time. I mean, be likable. Be a person that is a resource to somebody else. And if you don't do that, if the 3 of them don't do that, then you've not met over 1,000 people between the 3 people. Right. So, even in a small department, I mean, the mayor knows a lot of people, right? Go to the mayor and say, look, here's what we have to do. I have to get these messages out among your peers, your constituents. Who's connected well? I want to invite that person to come along, and just work on these things so that all of the hard work that we're doing all of the planning and all of that, all of the training. Good grief, that's a lot of stuff there. So I'll use an example. In Iraq, we would teach and train the local police to do all these incredible things. They were giving IVs, they were doing hand-to-hand combat, learning how to fingerprint, all this incredible stuff. I go on the ground and I start talking to locals, and I'm really good at asking questions. I'll boil it down, but basically I would say, who do you call when there's trouble? When the wolf's at the door, who are you going to call? My cousin, my brother, my neighbor, that guy down the street that's got that blue pickup truck. Never the cops. So you have all this training, all this hard work, and then you talk to the cops. What's the skill that you think is the coolest that you have? I don't have any skill. No one cares about me. But I just saw you whoop some guy's butt and give him a karate kick.
Right.
I can't do that. That's just for you guys. Are you kidding me? So when you go back to the commander, you're like, these guys don't even know they have the ability to fingerprint. They don't believe it themselves. How in the world is the population going to call these guys? So these are problems that, again, that are institutional. It's the ivory tower in college, right? Everybody knows the doctrine. Everybody knows the theory, but let's see them apply it. So you have to get ground based. Have to. And if you're not sure how to do it, call me on the phone. I'm glad to help you. I mean, this is the thing. You can have all the plans you want, but no kidding, who's going to follow it? What if we could get that number to, instead of below 5%? What if you can get it to 8%?
Yeah, actually, I think it's some last study was done somewhere around 1% for 3 days.
Yeah, right. So I mean, how much greater is that escalator problem because of that? It's just, and it's something that's simple to do. I don't know how long water lasts sitting in a sealed container. They try to get rid of it every 90 days, I don't know. And I know I can go find those things, but it's just not important to me. Now, if I had someone who I cared about saying, I care about you, I really need you to, think about these things, do me the favor, and put, I don't know, whatever, a case of chili in your garage or whatever it's going to be, then you can check on that and see what kind of progress you have. You can have little test beds. It's okay if you don't have it, but let me know. Have you done any of these things for me? No, I haven't. That's where the work begins. If I can't get this person, my friend, to do this, how in the world am I going to get a stranger to do it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this problem is really, as far as preparedness in general for the community, is one of those things that we've been struggling with for years. And
let's be honest, it's not struggling, it's failing.
It's failing.
Yeah. I mean, we're failing to come up with a way to do it. And if we handle it from that point, we all want to do better, we all try, but the reality is if we handled other aspects of our lives at that level, we would be like, this is dumb.
Right.
I want to be a quarterback in the NFL. It ain't happening no matter how much I try.
Right. It's funny you talk about that. I mean, look at Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah.
I remember at one point there was people, these are, and this sounds terrible to say it this way, but these are your typical upper middle class people living on the Upper West Side.
Yeah.
And they're eating food out of a dumpster.
Yeah.
Probably something they've never done in their lives because they didn't have any food or water inside their homes.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so they were not prepared, and they expected somebody to come on their white horse to save them, and they weren't coming, and they had to go get food.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean,
these are the things that, and then you take the flip side, and I have a lot of friends in South Florida because I used to live there, and I was texting them as the hurricane's hitting them. They're like, we still have power, generators ready to go, everything's boarded up, I got my hurricane glass, if it gets nasty, we'll not be in the front room, but they're fine. Absolutely not going to evac.
Yeah.
Evac order comes that's great. We know what we're doing. And the whole community made sure that, everybody, because, maybe someone's husband's out of town and he can't come back to town. That person's going to be fine. They're going to be boarded up. Everybody's going to be taken care of. They always say the happiest line is the line at the liquor store and the most angry line is the line at the gas station. But there's lines in both those places getting provisions.
Right.
And then if the hurricane misses them, I don't want to be in Tennessee. I can't miss work, and I have things to do. I can't be in Tennessee and the hurricane misses because they've seen that, right? So as an emergency manager, you have to go, look, these people are going to stay. What do we do for them? How do we help them? The folks that are going to leave, of course, you're dealing with them too, but that's the reality.
Some of the issues that we're having specifically with Irma, right, is the Keys just got devastated.
Yeah.
They didn't have any power, right? And then just a few miles up the road, you had guys that were prepared and had generators and stuff like that.
Right.
And they were just thinking it was like a regular day. And it was just, it's just kind of interesting in that aspect.
When I first moved there, I was like, what do we do? I don't even understand any part of this hurricane stuff. And they kept telling me, no, don't worry about it. We all have it. Like, what about gas for the tent? Like, you don't worry about that. You don't do that now. You do that later. They already had a system already in place. They knew, like, once they shut this down, the intercoastal shuts and everybody comes out of there because that's crazy to stay out there. But there's still people that will try to stay out. So they had this whole infrastructure already built where they were resilient on their own, and they knew what they needed to do, and they were accounting for it. Were they 100% accountable and resilient? No, of course not. But it's a lot different because that's a reality for them. And for the Keys people, unless you're new to that area and don't pay attention to your neighbors, you're going to be fine. I remember Janet Reno wrote about her and her mom hunkering down out in the Keys because that's where they were from or whatever. They had a house, and they just we buttoned up and got low and started picking up palm fronds the next day.
Right.
Like they know how to do it because that's the cultural requirement of that area. Same thing in the bayou. Those folks don't need rescuing.
Right.
They need being left alone, and they'll tell you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because there's some mixed reports coming out of Puerto Rico.
Right.
With the same thing. There's some people that are really devastated. Hospitals and stuff like that were down. That's the key part about getting those things back up is running was like the key infrastructure.
Yeah, right.
Hospitals, roads, things like this. But for the most part, the people that weren't sick or whatever, I mean, they're
back to work.
Yeah, back to doing their thing.
Yeah.
And, it sucked that power wasn't on, but they figured out how to do it, and they're survivors. At the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, like in the cities, San Juan, for instance, was really, really kind of screwed because they're city people.
Right. Yeah.
So the experience for the city people were way different than the experience for the people into the bush, for lack of a better term.
Right. Yeah. Up on the side of the hill, it's a different game for sure. Right. And they got hammered. Yeah. Really bad. And when the key infrastructure is failing, you're talking about a significant problem for sure for anybody, and you're just trying to mitigate at that point. I think. I mean, I'm not an expert in that field, but if the hospital is down and it has no power, that becomes a really high priority. Right.
Just reading some stuff, and obviously I'm not on the ground over there, and I'm just hearing reports that it seemed like the focus should have been, or still is, on getting the hospitals and the infrastructure back up and running. I think once that gets up and running again, everybody's going to be back to normal. It'll take a few years to rebuild some of the buildings and stuff like that, but the key portion of it's going to be okay.
Yeah, you can get care when you need it. Yeah, and you're talking, just like if we had a major hurricane, if we had a major earthquake here, there would be the thing of how do we keep this building standing up? How do we get people out of this building? And there's going to be a lot of other people like, we need help too, but at a lower level. Right. And you've got to manage that for 3+ million people or whatever. It does get crazy. And I'm not, understand, I'm critical, but I'm critical because I know that there are paths to do the things that we want to do. And if we get this part of the equation right, but don't get the other part of the equation right, we end up becoming a net destabilizer in these situations.
Right.
So we've got to get away from the net destabilization model. We got to get away from the fear-based model.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the fear-based model is terrible, and I think that makes the people get stuck on the escalator because they just don't know what to do. So I'm going to stand here,
right?
Because I don't know what else to do. Yeah,
and it's overwhelming. I mean, a podcast like this is great because you can start to create for even other emergency managers. Like, I'm overwhelmed, I give up. I'm going to get paid. I'm going to do what I got to do, and hopefully nothing happens. I mean, that's a real outcome for people, and it's a real outcome for the population. Like, I don't know if there's an earthquake, what the hell am I going to do anyhow? I don't know when it's going to be. Where it's okay. We've got go bags in all of our cars in our family, but I would bet that we're the only family on the block with that. Not because we're better, but just because my girl cares about that, and I've been shot at a whole bunch, so I know what it's like. Like, I need stuff so in case something happens. I've always got a towel. I've always got a poncho. I've always got these things so that I can take care of myself. But I've been in really bad places where I've had to not eat out of the dumpster, but I've had to make those kinds of choices between like something horrible and something worse, and you're like, wow. If I would have had a sterno can, I could have some heat, make this food hot, or whatever it's going to be, whatever simple thing it is. So why wouldn't I have these provisions laid out for myself? So easier said than done, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny, as emergency managers, we tell our citizens, hey, be prepared, be ready, be prepared, be ready, do this, do this, do this. And then at the same time, we mock those people that they call themselves preppers.
Yeah.
Those guys are ridiculous.
Right.
Like, well, but are we selling that? Yeah. Are we telling everybody to?
Yeah, and you're also competing with all the other crap I have to do. I can't drink out of a plastic bottle. Right. I have to work out. NSNG, no sugar, no rain. Like I'm out of things. I'm out of things that I get to care about. So you were competing with a very big message and complex too. Like, what's prepared? When do I know? How do I know? What if I'm a OCD person who needs to do it perfectly to get it even started?
Right.
I mean, it's all these things that you have to, account for or not account for them. But understand you're competing for their awareness for sure.
Right, and then you're competing with pop culture like we always have been, and those things are really exciting and important, and whoever won the last Emmy Awards or whatever.
Right.
I have to watch that show.
The population can tell us, I don't know what happened on Game of Thrones, but who can tell me the last Nobel Prize winner for physics?
Right.
One of those two things is way more important than the other.
Right.
And it's never the physics guy, literally. So we all know all these other things that don't matter. You're competing for that awareness.
Right.
And if you don't compete in a way that, this is why you want to work within their culture instead of building your own. Culture's as you experience it, not as you design it. And if you design something, again, you're internally focused. So neighbor for neighbor is a good idea. And let's do that. Let's continue to do it. But let's also look whenever we can to make neighbor for neighbor an add-on to lacrosse,
right,
football, whatever it's going to be, and get involved and communicate, not broadcast.
Speaking about that, Major League Baseball this year during the World Series, I think did a really good job because they're in Houston. It happened, and they did a great job of highlighting that disaster response, and specifically Team Rubicon.
Yeah.
Donating money to them for their
I love the whole Team Rubicon concept too. Yeah. And I think the MLB, I think all those organizations do a good job of that. And then the whole fill in the blank strong, Houston strong, Boston strong, like all of that stuff helps create awareness and everything. Yeah. I mean, you just don't want to have to be the one, you don't want to be the one that fills in the blank, Right. Orange County strong. Let's hopefully, something will happen. But yeah, Major League Baseball did great. And William McNulty and those guys are incredible. They give us veterans something to do. Here's a chainsaw, get to work. Okay, I have a purpose. Man, when I first came back, I needed a purpose like nobody's business, So it's a great way to do that. Let's keep doing more of those things.
Yeah, and they do a great job. Everybody who's been listening to this for a while knows that I'm involved with Team Rubicon at the level here in California in Region 9. But but it's a good program.
Yeah,
it really is a good program, and they're reaching out. And it's funny because we're just talking about this the other day. That used to be like 90% veteran. I think they're at like a 65% veteran now.
That's good. Yeah,
good. It's branching out.
Yeah, it's branching out, and there's because there are people that want to help, and they have time, and they're like, I am going to hop on this plane and go to this place or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Well, hey, so we're getting here close to the end of the podcast, and I just wanted you to talk about your podcast a little bit, what you're doing.
Which podcast should we talk about? I got a bunch of them.
I think I like the Lakers one, but
yeah, I do have a Lakers podcast called Lakers Rain, and it's at Lakers Rain Pod on Twitter. You can always reach me and ask me legitimately, please reach out and ask me. Pete A. Turner on Twitter. You can find me, link with me on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find. But I've got my main podcast is called Break It Down Show, and we get really notable people. We're going to have Randy Jackson on soon.
Oh, great.
From American Idol. We've had Stuart Copeland from The Police has been on our show. So we get we just passed 200. Well, we're about to pass 200 shows on Friday, so we've been at this for a while. Yeah, thanks, man. So a good place to go for great podcast stuff. If you like technology, I've got one of those. But the biggest thing I would encourage people to do is just reach out. I am linked to a lot of emergency managers on LinkedIn, and if you want ideas, I'm glad to help. I'm glad to consult for money, but I will also do everything I can to go, here are areas where I would focus. And if you need my help, great. I accept all forms of payment. Not Diners Club.
Not Diners Club?
No. But I
take Starbucks cards.
Starbucks. I would. You know what? I absolutely would take Starbucks cards. I absolutely will help, and I will do everything I can to be as cost effective as I can. But I know that what I do works because I've done it in places that are way worse than wherever we're at. You know? So those are the things, like ask questions. I'm glad to help out. Break It Down Show at breakitdownshow.com. Popping the Bubble with no E on the end. P-U-B-B-L. These are the places where my podcasts are. I'm passionate about what you guys are doing. I mean, this is important work. Obviously. And I hope that we can all hold ourselves to a high standard, because that one person that we help it's going to make all the difference, Right. And I want to make, this is one of my things I've been thinking about, I want to make first responders 1.5 responders, because you respond to yourself, self-aid is the first aid, right?
True.
And your buddy aid is the next. And then hopefully the first responder's there and is like, oh, you already got a poncho? Man, this is great. I want to sit here and, have a dip and relax. So, we all want to get to the same place.
Right.
It's just let's rethink how we approach and let's think affect first. How do we get the affects that we want?
Perfect. Well, everybody, thank you for listening today. Like I said before, please share this with your friends, family, colleagues, and whoever else you think would get something out of it. Pete, thank you so much for being here. Before we let you go, is there anything you want to add?
No, you've heard it all. Communicate, affect over effect, and ask Pete. I will help.
Loving me was all you tried when you were around. I've been told too many times now. Yeah, loving me was all you tried when you were around. I've been told too many times now. But somewhere I'll go run and hide, looking for a new start. Yeah, somewhere I'll go run and hide, looking for a new start, for a new start. Looking for a new start. Looking for a new start. Don't wanna be trapped, don't wanna be down. Looking for a new start. Can't you see that I just need to be by myself? I have told you many times now. Yeah, can't you see that I just need to be by myself? I have told you many times now. But somewhere I'll go run and hide, looking for a new start. Yeah, somewhere I'll go run and hide, looking for a new start, for a new start. Looking for a new start. Looking for a new start. Don't wanna be trapped, don't wanna be down. Looking for a new start. Yeah, somewhere looking for a new